Welcome to the Revenue Rewired podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO, Jay Feitlinger, and no-nonsense COO, Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. Hello, and welcome everybody to this next episode of the Revenue Rewired podcast. Hi, Jay.
Hola, Sarah.
You had to think about it. You wanted to do it in Italian, but you couldn't
I
remember, did
did.
you? Ah!
And I didn't want to butcher it.
Oh,
Duolingo is
well,
not
try it
helping.
anyway. Try it anyway.
No.
Is it
Ciao. I
ciao?
don't
Ciao.
know. Buonasera.
Bonjour. Bonjour. I'm working on my French too, people. I wish you and I could learn a language that we could try to speak together, but
Oh, that sounds
I
awesome.
can't. Italian looks way too complicated for me. French
I'm
actually
struggling.
seems
Struggle bus.
I know. Yeah, Duo has given up on you, I think.
Yes.
All right.
See.
Well, to see, I think there you go.
Wrong
Good job.
language.
Yeah, at least you're consistent with Spanish.
Oh gosh.
Well, today we wanted to talk about a very poignant topic that I'm sure a lot of you can resonate with, and it's why more leads quietly make your revenue system worse. And this one is just fascinating to us because more often than not, I think you can resonate as a business person or a marketer that I don't get it, Jay. Why isn't more leads the answer every time? And I think like this one is a tough one. It's really a hard pill to swallow, especially if this is something that consistently worked for you in the past. I think if anything, what I've heard from marketers is that the last 2 to 3 years has been the most disruptive in terms of refiguring out what's working. I think it was kind of headed in that direction. COVID took a little pause where there were different views of what was important to work on in the business. So lots of projects that had been put off were completed, things that weren't necessarily, quote, direct lead generation, but were tangential marketing supported issues like my website is broken and I really should have fixed it 3 years ago, but now's a great time, that kind of thing. And Jay, I know you also recently wrote about this and launched your new Revenue Rewired newsletter on LinkedIn, which will put your profile in the show notes. But talk to us about maybe a recent conversation that you had where this was, again, something that comes up and why is getting more leads like not the best answer?
I mean, I would say this probably happens with every client we've worked with, but it's funny as we're thinking about this episode, I reflected on my first client I ever worked with, gosh, 25 years ago. And it was a higher education organization, and they had a number of leads goal that they wanted to have us achieve when they let go of their last agency and hired us. This was at an agency that I was at prior to launching StringCan 15 years ago. And after the first month, I came into that meeting with them. I think the goal was, I don't know, like 2,000 leads a week. And so I think we delivered like 8,100 for the month. So in my mind, it was going to be the best meeting ever. And they brought on a random person I never met before. It was like a rev operational type of role that I've never really met with before. And that person chewed me up the entire meeting. And again, I was much younger back then, so I didn't have as much thick skin. But it literally killed me. And basically, the whole point is, it's like don't congratulate yourself and pat yourself on the back that you guys met our lead goal because like 60% of the leads you delivered were complete garbage. And all you did was waste our time and money. And we just felt like it was a huge fail. And I'm like, great. That was my first meeting with this new client as an account supervisor. Love my job. This is great. But in hindsight, I think it probably was probably the best thing that ever could have happened to me. Because the problem would have been is that if that didn't happen to me, let's say for 5 or 10 more years, I would just lived my marketing career as just focusing on that one KPI. You asked for a number of goal leads and we got them to you. But I didn't think about it from the business point of view regarding this weird fuzzy feeling like the volumes make you feel safe regarding the quantity of leads you get. And that is where I think a lot of marketing people I think struggle is they don't figure out how that the job of marketing is to help sales. And that's where I think we do a really good job here at String Can is that we understand that the alignment between marketing and sales is so important. And so that's really why I think to answer your question is I think it's a really interesting thing where it's almost like this weird drug where if you're disconnected from actually, talking with prospective customers and the only metric you have to go off of is the volume, and if the volume isn't hitting this random number that you came up with for some reason, then you feel like marketing is not working. And again, we just had a chat with one of our current clients, and we luckily did hit their lead number goal. But what's more important is she was so happy with the quality that their conversion rate went from like I don't know like 11 or 12% they used to have before working with us, and now over 30% from lead to actually closing a new contract. So I think for that conversation, taking a step back, this is where I think companies need to invest time is the quality is more important than the quantity more often than not.
Yeah, and it's funny, like the focus on certain metrics. It's I think part of it is because there's frankly an overwhelming amount of data that you can pull from. And so I think it's easy for a lot of teams to kind of cherry pick numbers that are very straightforward and make sense. And that's why attribution is constantly a challenge because as being in this industry, it's not cut and dried. It is not straightforward. We've seen it a ton of times where someone pokes around for 6 months, makes a bunch of calls, and then all of a sudden they fill out a form 7 months later, and the ad from which they filled out the form is the direct attribution, not the ad they saw 8 months ago necessarily, unless you have really good systems in place to track that information, which most don't, because it is a lot of work. I mean, attribution is one thing we do a lot of work in, and I definitely appreciate how much more complex it is now. And so when I think about the lead game, the quality quantity issue, it kind of reminds me of like if you go shopping and you save $200 and you spent $2,000, you are focusing on I saved $200. And
Is that
that's what we
girl
call
math?
girl math. Yes, yes. But
I'm
really, you
cool.
spent $2,000, and so it's so easy to kind of pick that number. And this is where there's also an issue with the and maybe as an operator, I think operators can kind of see maybe a couple steps ahead in anticipation of these issues where the quality game is also a very risky space if you are not ready to accept the quality that you are anticipating. So if you don't have a system in place to be ready for, the increase that you are hopefully working toward, like that's really your goal. I want this to increase. Is that now going to create a horrific customer experience because, for example, their hold time is doubled? You can't handle the amount of traffic, like you don't answer the questions. There's a myriad of reasons, and I think sometimes adding more is not the best solution.
It's funny. I love that story you gave about the shopping part because, it got me thinking just now about the psychological impact of all of this stuff. And again, depending upon your role, I think it's really interesting. So, for example, tied to the new newsletter that I started putting out the week, it's going to come out. It's a weekly newsletter coming out on Tuesdays, and the first one just came out. And what's funny is, you know, I know better, but I still constantly have these issues on the whole metric part. And so, for example, like with that, the LinkedIn article I just put out that you just that this show's about, it got a lot of opens. I was really impressed. I think it had like I don't know, like more than 400 or 500 opens in that first like hour. Um, and then I'm like, okay, this is good. People are opening it, they're reading it. But then why do I only have like 4 likes? And I found myself end of the day, I spend so much time on really thinking through what I wanted to say as concise as possible in that post, and getting it out there. And I'm like, this is great. It's going to be awesome. And then no one's commenting, barely any likes, but a bunch of reads. I'm like, maybe I did a bad job. Maybe my call to action wasn't good. Maybe it wasn't very compelling. And then the next day, I got like two texts, one from a client and then one from, a pretty impressive business advisor I know, how much they loved reading it. So I know I was funny. I came back to you. Now I was like back up on the high of the roller coaster where I ended up on the low, a couple hours before that. And I thought it was interesting how then you dove in. You're like, well, I could see that they read it, but why didn't they comment? Why did they like it? And I just think that we all get so hung up on these kind of vanity metrics. And I think to your point, it's like, end of the day, as long as you understand your audience, and you're really putting out good work, and you're focusing again on quality over quantity, and you're consistent about it, it's amazing how at some point in time it'll end up working out. I just feel like marketers, and I'm guilty again of this, is that, we over think and analyze these various different random metrics. End of the day, we're not thinking about, humans. And so, it's like people are busy and some people are not comfortable engaging on social media, or commenting. Some people are more, maybe introverted versus extroverted. There's just so many dynamics and variables in play here. I just think, back to your point before, if you can just focus less on this random number and more about really analyzing your entire process, which I kind of talked about in the article, it's like instead of like being like how many leads did that salesperson X get, instead be like with the leads they got, what was that first conversation like? And was that a right fit client? And end of the day, if you're having conversations with the right people and enough of them that it's going to help you, hit the numbers, then that should be the focus on improving the entire process from lead to marketing to sales and then ops, versus just throwing more money at marketing just to increase your quantity of leads because that vanity metric now all of a sudden feels good. And that being said, I'm not at all poo-pooing setting strong goals around leads you need if you really understand your funnel. But for those companies that haven't first taken a step back and analyzed, is their current, sales process and funnel optimized? Those where I think they have huge missed opportunities because again, they're just wasting money. And so that's why I always recommend, which is why I love, obviously I'm biased, but I love our book, is because we focus so much on the improving the foundation of your marketing and sales process and less about throwing out more tactics.
Yeah, and what I found lately in the conversations that are happening with my peers and in these, business social channels is going back to the foundations. And I think that's kind of an unsung hero of this whole AI era is that a lot of people who are recognizing the opportunities that AI has, as well as the challenges, and frankly, the unknowns, which outnumbers both of those combined, is that, hey, I'd like to go back to the foundation and double check, triple check everything is in place and what needs to be revisited. Because there's nothing in this world that is that consistent that doesn't need revitalizing. Even HubSpot, I mean, this giant mammoth company continues doing work to refine their customer journey experience often. And we've moved from the funnel, which was so two-dimensional, to the flywheel, which felt slightly more consistent with the customer experience, to now this loop, this infinity loop, which is more indicative of how the experience truly is when you have repeat customers. Like that's the goal. It's not in one end and out the other, which was kind of what was being shown before.
Hmm.
So I think if marketers aren't too proud or and sales leaders, I think this goes for sales too, that sit there often so busy. I mean, everyone's busy. I think that's part of the problem is it's really hard to go back to the basics when you are so overwhelmed and so busy. But if you could just make an opportunity, whether it's quarterly, it's a great time to stop and revisit all of your foundations. And I think the tool that you and I have put together that helps people through this process is kind of the revenue flow map. It's a little bit back to foundations and basics of what is the actual experience, because you should never be too proud or too busy to go back and revisit your your foundations and your processes, especially with sales and marketing.
I love that obviously, and I think it's interesting. It's if you have the real conversations, if you have that kind of relationship with your team, like an RN, obviously with our clients, and working backwards off the goals, understanding the why. I think that is honestly makes a lot smarter because again, like we had a chat with the recent clients discussion, and the whole thing was they needed this number of leads to fill the capacity, but it was all based upon they had some poor performing salespeople there. And I just found myself really struggling. And so I just couldn't, bite my tongue. And I had to speak up where I'm like, so basically, what you're saying to us is we need to get more leads for, C-level salespeople who likely couldn't close an amazing lead regardless. Shouldn't we find a way to optimize leads we're getting today and not keep investing more money into, other things that maybe aren't working as well? And it really opened up. They really appreciated that. It was obviously a little scary 'cause I didn't know how it was gonna be taken. But I think those are the kind of conversations that you just kind of you alluded to, where it's like, I just think that's why I like the way we think about this stuff. You have to take a step back and be like, okay, stop treating marketing as an island or sales as an island. They're all separate things. Instead, it's like this holistic view of your entire business. And again, focus on, what are the numbers you need to hit to, fuel the engine to help grow the business to hit, your BHAG, big hairy audacious goal, and then work backwards off of that. But stop blaming marketing that numbers aren't being hit because you just need to get more quantity of leads. It's very likely that the way you're handling those leads right now, between coming into your brand and going from marketing to sales and sales to ops, there might be friction points there that might be the problem and not the quantity of leads. That's why I really like this topic because it's really interesting is that's typically the first chat that I have with new potential clients that want to hire us is they're like, right now we're getting X number of leads a week from our current agency. We're not happy with them. Can you guys get us more? And I'm like, I don't know. It's like there's so many variables and factors in play. For all I know, your agency is doing a great job you're working with. Why don't we do a proper assessment and holistically look at the entire business? Because what we might find is your brand and marketing are solid. It might be your sales process. And that's why I just feel like agencies that are still only focusing on just marketing and tactics, I think are missing huge opportunities to help their clients because they're missing a big part of the equation.
I'm gonna throw out a really nerdy thing. I've been noodling over this for probably a couple weeks, and I think you know the term daisy chaining, where you add a couple of
Yep.
connectors and it's getting to the end, right? The output. So imagine you've got this computer, right? And you're trying to daisy chain to a projector. And to me, that is the customer's view of your business is what's being shown on the projector. And if you don't connect each part of your business through that daisy chain, they're seeing nothing. They're because they aren't a customer. Nothing is consistent for them. And if you aren't able to see from start to finish the experience that the customer has through each of those parts of the business, you can't re-optimize because the customer experience is never the same from cycle to cycle. Like even you yourself as a purchaser, a consumer, you've changed. Like we all know there are certain, I don't want to call them out, but there are certain tools that we could reach out to where they'll give us a couple free months if we want to cancel. You've kind of learned how to navigate the system as a consumer, which that was never the way. You would just let it go on until you canceled the credit card because it was such a pain to get a hold of
Yep.
anyone. Now you go to a chat bot and your problem is solved in 2 minutes in some cases. And so I think like ignoring that is a big detriment to evolving your basically the experience that anyone is having with your business. And that goes leaps and bounds because keeping those customers is, I think, harder than ever.
Yeah, I love the whole daisy chain thing. That was a very good analogy, not too nerdy. So that was pretty solid. But I think again, that's why I like this topic. So, the main point here is just again, just before you throw out numbers, just take a step back, look at the daisy chain model as Sarah just kind of talked about. I love that idea, that analogy. Because again, how all this is stringed together, obviously playing off our brand there, I think is just a critical part of business growth.
Hmm. Well, and if you ever need any seriously unbiased support or help, Jay and I are always available for calls because, you know, even if we can't solve your problems, we can definitely help you unpack some of that low-hanging fruit, and we'd love to do that. So reach out to us at podcast@stringcaninteractive.com. And Jay, this was a great topic. I'm looking forward to more editions of your newsletter.
I appreciate that. Hopefully you read them.
I definitely do. I definitely do because I know you're going to quiz me and we're going to talk
I
about it.
will. We'll test. All right. Thanks,
All
everyone.
right.
Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Rewired podcast. Send us your questions to podcast@stringcaninteractive.com and follow us for more insights to drive your business forward.